Welcome to Pandas Nightmares. In today's video you will hear some stories from people which made them believe in the afterlife. Some are scary, while others are kind of sad. If you do like my video, do like and subscribe as it will help me grow. Thank you in advance, and now, let's get started. Story 1. I had to put my dog to sleep. She had a very aggressive cancer. Back then, I wasn't into anything paranormal. That night I came home completely destroyed. I had a dream in which I was climbing a snowy mountain. It was very cold. My dog was rolled up as if she too was very cold, right next to my car. It was a red Honda Fit. In my dream I picked her up and took her inside the car, where she got warm. I took it as my decision had been the best for her, and as if that somehow had taken her to a better, warmer place. But in my skeptic mind, it was just a subconscious elaboration of the trauma that happened in 2017, if I remember correctly. Last year we put an altar for Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead. It was my idea to put the urn of my dog in the altar, next to my dad. I was alone, talking to my dog, and got super emotional. I began to cry, and suddenly the tablecloth moved right at the bottom, as if something little had pushed it. We use rigid paper tablecloths for Dia de Muertos altars, which doesn't move easily. Every window was closed, so no wind. It might sound ridiculous, but I just know my dog came to visit and walked past her altar. It also made me realize the dream I had her last night wasn't really a dream, but more like a visitation message. Gayat damn, now I'm crying. Story 2. My ex-boyfriend and I adopted a dog together. And in the breakup, he got Duncan, although I loved him deeply. They had an incredible bond. Duncan was also a gigantic black shepherd that was probably also part wolf. I ended up moving states to be close to my family, and apparently Duncan's health started to decline. He had to be put down, and it devastated both me and my ex. A few nights after I found out about his passing, I had a vivid dream about Duncan. I was in a beautiful lush field, and I was admiring it. All of a sudden I saw Duncan across the way. He ran out and stared at me, but was too far away for me to get him, and we were separated by a stream. He looked at me for a while, then he turned and ran off. I woke up crying, knowing in my heart that he came to say goodbye to me. I do believe there is something after this life, but have no idea what it entails for me. For dogs, I believe it is a paradise of beautiful green pastures. Story 3. I have extremely vivid dreams that connect me to the afterlife. I lost my dad in 2018. He had problems with arm pain right before he passed away. The arm pain is completely unrelated to how he died. He died from a random heart attack. He was my absolute best friend. We were so close. 3 days after he passed away, I had a dream. He was at my front door and said, "Look, I'm all better now," and held up his arm, waved it around. The dreams continued. In one dream I approached him. He was sitting down in a metal chair outside, and I hugged him. He told me that whenever I find bits of money, it's him visiting me. I sure did find bits of money in the oddest places. In a shoe that I was wearing. Found it at the end of a work day. Never felt it. A $20 bill folded up like he used to fold them in his truck wasn't there before. I had it detailed too. Cash in the jacket I wore when we last ate lunch out together. No, I didn't have this cash because I paid that day and I used card. About my dog, I had my best girl for 10 years, exactly. To the day. She was approx 16 years old. I had a dream where she walked into my living room. I knew she was no longer living. There was another person in my dream who said, "Just hold her." Through a dream, I got to hold my little girl dog again. I woke up knowing I had just held her. I could feel her fur. I knew she came to visit me. I believe in an afterlife 100%. Story 4. I'm not going to associate my religious background here. This is what I personally saw. I had a cousin who was dear to me, who died when he was only 19. It really hurt me and my family beyond words. When I visited my aunt and her husband, which both are the parents of this cousin of mine, they told me the whole story, and I couldn't contain myself at that time at all. In the same day my cousin died, he woke up and went to work. Almost at noon that day, his dad was napping, and he saw a dream. Only it wasn't just a dream. He saw himself in that dream complaining about a hardship they were facing at that time. His son patted him and told him, "Dad, this life of the world is going." It's hard to translate his exact words now, years after, from my native language to English. But I never ever from that time hesitated about believing in afterlife. I also know of many other stories. One is from a friend of mine. Her brothers died. In a miserable way, they were killed a couple of days apart. When the first brother died, and a couple of days passed, she saw him in her dreams. He looked so well that she didn't even hesitate in knowing he is doing better than amazing somewhere beyond the skies. He told her he missed his brother who was at that time alive. She begged him in her dream that he wouldn't take him. But he said he wanted his company, and he wanted to. Then the second brother was killed. It wasn't a murder or anything, it has to do with war, which I won't get into. We were born for a purpose, whether we realize that or not. We were born for so much more. So much more that will eventually end, and a new chapter will begin. Story 5. I lost a very close elderly relative a few months back. On the night she found out she was moving to hospice, she claimed she awakened to see her bed surrounded by her mother, father, uncle, and what she described as angels. All of them bathed in warm light. She was comforted, and it made it easier on me, who was dealing with her healthcare stuff and home, etc. Personally, my dad passed 20 plus years ago. Several months later, it became clear that my mum was going to need to put her dog down. I arranged for the vet to come to my mum's house. At the last minute, my mum was second-guessing her decision. She shouldn't have. The dog was very sick. As we are discussing it, the lights in the kitchen start flipping on and off. I could see the light switch moving up and down. The radio in the kitchen turned off. We all looked at each other before Mum said, "Dad's here. He's telling me it's time to say goodbye to the dog." The vet was practically in shock. Never happened before or after that day. Completely changed my thinking about an afterlife. Story 6. My dad died when I was 15. When I was 24. My mum died, and then barely 3 months later, my stepmom, who was my best friend in the wild world, also died. One night, not long after her memorial, I was laying on the couch crying and just kind of desperately sad. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I basically just begged anyone who was listening for some kind of sign that I would see them again someday and not have to be so alone. Related tangent. When I was little, before my parents separated, so I was maybe 3 or 4, I would lay on my dad's chest while he watched football, and he would rub his thumb across my forehead and eyebrows to out me to sleep. Magic toddler off button, I swear. Anyway, later on, when he got custody of me, and I was about 8, he did something similar for a while. So anyway, I fell asleep not long after that and woke up because I felt someone rubbing my eyebrows. When I opened my eyes, no one was there. I was alone on the couch. I had forgotten, or at least hadn't thought about in years, the forehead thing that my dad did. I'll never know for sure, I guess, but I think maybe he came to try and comfort me. Story 7. On the day I was to euthanize my dog, she suddenly started running around chasing butterflies. I called our family vet and said, "I can't possibly go through with it." The vet came around. My beautiful dog climbed into my lap and looked into my eyes and communicated with me that it was time. She'd lived a long and I hope charmed life. The vet injected her. She fell into eternal sleep in my lap with my son's hands on her. We cried. We wrapped her in a beautiful cloth, and my son buried her. 2 weeks later, I had this most vivid dream. She's in my lap again. We're driving through the night, and she envelops me with powerful, loving energy. She said thanks, that it was the right time, and that I should carry her shine on. She taught me about love. She taught my son and I how to celebrate life and mourn in grace. Story 8. My grandmother died in 2005. She was in the hospital with tubes down her throat so she couldn't talk. She would write what she wanted to say. One of her sons had been killed when he was 17 years old, and in the last 2 to 3 days of her life, she kept staring at and pointing at something in the hospital room. Remember, she couldn't talk at the time, so she was writing. She wrote to us that her son was in the room with her, and he was helping her cross over. I never saw her go to church a single day in my life, but she said she could see heaven, and it was beautiful. Story 9. About 10 years or so ago, I had a cat called Oscar. He was a little cute bobcat. So no nail, just a little hubby tuft of fur lol. He was a good cat. He developed an aggressive cancer, and it quickly took him within 2 weeks of seeing the first signs that something wasn't right with him. I took him to the vet, and they gave me the bad news. I was so heartbroken. I'm choking up just writing this. It was a Friday, and I left him with the vets. He was just too sick. They could at least provide him with some medicine and comfort. The next morning, they told me that he had passed away during the night. I bawled. I went and collected him and brought him home and buried him in the backyard. I've only cried hard like that maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire life. It hurt so much, and I was also fairly lonely at the time, so I didn't have anyone around to talk to about it. I dealt with it alone. That Sunday, I was standing in my doorway, looking up at the sky, still just devastated but not crying. I had to go back to work in the morning. I pleaded to the sky in my mind, just give me a sign that he's out there somewhere. Just show me something. So before I start the next part, I've got to add some context. Not long before all of this, I had to replace my smartphone as the screen had cracked, and it was time to get a new one anyway. I couldn't use the phone because of the cracked screen, so I just let it go flat and started using my new phone. Little Oscar would always sleep in the bed with me, and without fail, he would always wake me up a good 10 minutes before the alarm went off for work, 3:50 a.m., like clockwork, lol. Now, fast forward back to the present day of this story. Oscar has passed. It's Sunday, and I have work in the morning, but I'm still just so beside myself. I looked up at the sky and pleaded for a sign that he was okay, that he was out there somewhere. The next morning, my dead phone with the cracked screen that had gone flat weeks prior suddenly turned back on and the alarm started going off. At 3:50 a.m., I took that for the sign that it was. Story 10. When I had to put my best doggy friend of 14 years down, she came to me in a dream. I was in a huge field of mountains, and the softest grass I'd ever seen was blowing in the breeze. The breeze was warm, the sun was shining, the sky was beautiful, and the grass was so soft, it smelled like spring. It was the nicest place I've ever been to. Then I saw her running towards me, with a big smile on her face. We embraced and then ran through the fields together, and I just knew she was showing me where she was and that she was okay, and that she would be waiting for me there until it's my turn. It was the most loving place, full of love and energy and pure bliss that I had ever felt. Like nothing of this earthly world. I woke up in the morning knowing I had just been with her. I will never forget the feeling. Story 11. When my mother died, afterwards we left the hospital. My family and I went to my house to sleep. My dad slept in my room. I was on the couch. My children around me on airbeds, other family members in other bedrooms. In the wee hours of the morning, I woke to someone touching my face. I thought it was one of my children. Once I fully woke and adjusted my eyes to the dark, I saw the figure of my mother, bending over each of my children and touching their faces. Then, she just faded away. The following morning, each family member came downstairs with a version of the same story. My mother never got to say goodbye in the hospital. We thought she was going to come home. One day talking and joking, the next she had multiple strokes and was never conscious again. The night she died, she made sure she said goodbye to all of her loved ones. I truly believe for a short time after death, the spirit is still with the living. Story 12. I am a devout Christian and I know why I believe what I believe. With that said, my mom had an experience that I found interesting and heartbreaking. She and my dad divorced a long time ago, and he passed away in 2015. They weren't on good terms. One night, while she was sleeping, as she describes it, he called out to her and appeared to her. She said that she refused to listen to him, telling him that they were divorced and she isn't going to listen to him. But he stopped her and told her that he had to warn her about my younger brother because he was in danger. Turns out, my younger brother was abusing prescription drugs, and it was seriously affecting his health. He didn't reveal this secret until she went calling and telling him the story. The rational part of my brain says that it is possible she recognized something subconsciously. But the other side of my brain finds the whole thing really bizarre. Story 13. My best friend's Joy's father died. I probably spent as much time at Joy's house growing up as my own. So you could say he was like a second dad. Fast forward to a few months after he passed. I kept having incredibly vivid dreams of him telling me he was watching his wife and Joy. He kept telling me he is with them. This went on for months. Every time it happened, I wanted to share with Joy, but I didn't want to upset her, so I kept it to myself. After a few months, I started to feel like I had to tell Joy. I knew I couldn't call her about it, as I am an emotional person. I ended up sending her a long message, explaining everything I have seen. We both cried. She was so thankful for everything I told her. Joy had also been having vivid dreams about her dad, but he could never talk to her in them. She was a little jealous that he talked to me, but was still thankful to get the message. It has now been 10 years since this all happened, and I have never again had a dream about Joy's dad. I guess he is now happy that she got his message, and I 100% believe it was him. Story 14. My granddad passed years ago. We weren't close in that I would see him all the time because he lived quite far away, but he was my granddad, and just the best man. I had a dream after he passed, where we were sat in a bright white room, the purest white you can imagine. There was nothing in the room but 2 armchairs and a small table between them. My granddad was sat in one chair, and he asked me to please sit so he could speak to me. He was dressed in a white suit, and he just looked at peace. I can't really remember what we talked about, but I remember he was laughing because when I asked if it was really him, he said, "Of course, I've stopped speaking in my Irish accent so you can understand me for once." We used to joke that sometimes he would say something, but his thick Irish accent meant it would take a bit to understand what he was saying. I started crying and asked him why he had to go because my mum still needed him, and she was so sad that she didn't get to say goodbye. He just told me that it was just his time to go and that it was okay and he was okay. He was happy. He then said, "When it's time for your mum to pass, I know that you'll be really upset and sad because you won't be able to help her. I want you to know that when it's time, I will come for her and I'll be there to guide her. So please do not worry or be scared, because I'll be there." That's all I remember, but the accent, comment, and the thing with worrying about my mum has always stayed with me. Story 15. My husband and I were trying to conceive. I had no trouble getting pregnant, but I had miscarriage after miscarriage. I was really distressed emotionally and physically with all the miscarriages. One night I had a vivid dream. So vivid, I swear, it was real. I walked in a room to find my great-grandmother who passed when I was 5, and my grandmother who passed when I was 16, were having tea. They told me that it was important to remember that we represented a string of women stretching way back in time. My mother and I were part of that line, and although my mother wasn't with the grandmothers yet, she would soon be. They emphasized how special this community of women were and the chain going back through time. I come from a German-American community in the upper Midwest, in which we still speak German and maintain German traditions. Both of them were speaking German, but in dialect that was hard to understand. They told me how happy they were that I was able to study in our Heimat and visit and live in the places our maternal ancestors lived. They poured me some tea and told me not to worry, that I would have my mum with me for some time yet, and that I would have a baby. They told me that I would soon get pregnant, but I would lose the baby. However, with the next pregnancy after that, I would give birth to a daughter who would form part of our matrilineal chain. They told me how much they struggled as immigrants, and how they were kept illiterate by society because they were women. They kept telling me not to worry, that my daughter would be lovely and educated. When I woke up, I felt at peace and really happy. I was absolutely convinced that I had been with my grandmothers, and that I would have a daughter. Sure enough, I got pregnant again, but had another miscarriage. But I wasn't as upset that time, because I just knew the next pregnancy would be successful. Sure enough, I got pregnant once again, had an easy pregnancy and delivery, and gave birth to a healthy baby girl. It was all happened just the way they said it would. I've never had such a vivid dream before or since. I'm usually skeptical about things like this, but I was absolutely certain that what my grandmothers told me would happen exactly as it did. Like I had absolutely no doubts at all. My daughter and I are super close, and she is now a civil rights lawyer working to reform the prison system. I have a PhD and teach at an Ivy University. That is all for today. If you have enjoyed this video, do like and subscribe. I post 4 to 5 times a week or more, so if you like listening to stories while you work, I got you. Hope you have an absolutely amazing. You can check my other videos on screen.